Why do we sabotage what we want most? You ever get really close to something good and then destroy it yourself? Not because of bad luck, not because of bad timing, because something in you needed it to fall apart. Think about the last time you sabotaged something. A job interview where you said the wrong thing, and you knew in real time you were saying it. A relationship where you picked a fight right when things were getting good. A project you abandoned 3 weeks before it was done. You told yourself it was nerves, that you weren't ready, that the timing was off, but somewhere underneath all that there was a quieter voice, and that voice knew the truth that she was used to, repeating it for years. She was your shadow, guiding you. Today we're going to talk about why, and the answer is going to be more uncomfortable than you're expecting. The brain was never on your side. The first layer of this is neurological, and it's the easiest to understand, even if it's not the deepest. Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how humans actually make decisions, not how we think we decide, how we actually do. And what he found was unsettling. The brain has two systems. One is fast, intuitive, automatic. The other is slow, deliberate, and exhausting. And given any choice at all, the brain defaults to the first one, not because you're weak, because energy conservation was survival for most of human history. Imagine our ancestors on the African savannas, facing real threats, the kind that could kill you, like a lion. I'm not talking about your colleague sitting next to you. They had to respond as fast as possible to stay alive. We've spent at least 300,000 years shaped by this pattern of behavior. It runs deeper in us than you can imagine. But here's where it gets strange. We still respond quickly, often unconsciously, to everything in our lives, trying to conserve energy the way we were shaped to. So the brain just wants ease, right? We should all be lounging in comfortable mediocrity, vaguely content. But that's not what happens, at least not for most of us. We actively create difficulty, manufacture drama. We construct obstacles and then exhaust ourselves fighting them. In the end, it's as if the brain says, if we don't have a threat anymore, let's create one. If the brain just wants rest, why does it keep choosing war? Because the brain doesn't just want ease, it wants something even more than that. And to understand what that is, we need to go much further back. Not into neuroscience, into myth. Every hero had to bleed first. Here's a question. Think of every hero you've ever admired, in any story, from any culture, from any time in history. Did any of them reach their greatest moment without suffering first? Think about it carefully. I'll wait. You can't think of one, because there isn't one. Christ didn't teach his way to salvation. He was tortured and crucified. The stations of the cross aren't stations of wisdom. They are stations of agony. And the message absorbed by billions, consciously or not, is that suffering is sacred. That pain is the price of transcendence. The Buddha's path begins with the recognition that all life is suffering, dukkha. His awakening came after years of extreme asceticism, starving himself nearly to death. It's the emancipated Buddha of the extreme path. In Judaism, for example, the chosen people are chosen for what exactly? For exile, for wandering, for persecution. Job doesn't win, he endures. And he's rewarded not for conquering his circumstances, but for not breaking under them. Every hero's journey, from Odysseus to Luke Skywalker, follows the same structure: descent before ascent, the dark forest before the kingdom, the cave before the crown. Joseph Campbell spent his life documenting this. It's in every culture, every era, every mythology on earth. The hero must descend before they can rise. The wound comes before the wisdom. The hidden message we all absorbed is, these stories weren't wrong, not at all. They were capturing something real, that growth does require difficulty, that the comfortable path rarely leads anywhere meaningful. There is a very important lesson on that. But somewhere along the way, the message inverted. Instead of suffering as a necessary passage, it became an identity, a permanent address, a home. And now you've inherited this template, even in its secular forms. The starving artist, the tortured genius. the entrepreneur who brags about sleeping 4 hours. We worship suffering aesthetically, even when we've abandoned the theology behind it. So without ever consciously deciding it, you learn this lesson early in life, and you learned it deep. Pain means you're on the path. Suffering means you're serious. And if things are going well, maybe you haven't earned it yet. This is the template running in the background of every decision you make, and it's perfectly designed to keep you stuck. Jung's uncomfortable discovery. Now here's where Carl Jung enters, and where this goes from uncomfortable to genuinely unsettling. Jung spent his life mapping the architecture of the unconscious. He sat across from thousands of patients, and one of his most disturbing observations was this: they resisted healing, not because they enjoyed suffering, no, but because their suffering had become structural, load-bearing walls in the architecture of their identity. Remove them too quickly, and the whole building threatens to collapse. Think about that. The ego does not primarily seek happiness. It seeks coherence. It seeks to recognize itself. And it will sacrifice almost anything: success, love, health, peace, to maintain that recognition. Carl Jung. What do you understand about that? If you've spent years seeing yourself as someone who struggles, someone who almost makes it, someone who was dealt a bad hand, then what does success become for you? Something truly unattainable maybe, or maybe worse, a threat to your shadow. Because success would mean becoming someone you don't recognize, and the ego experiences that discontinuity as a kind of death. Not physical death, something more intimate. The annihilation of the self you've always known. Think about when someone denies what you say. Who likes that? And why don't we like it? Because questioning our truths touches exactly where it hurts. This is why insight alone never changes anyone. You can understand perfectly why you do something and still keep doing it, because understanding operates at one level, identity operates deeper. Even though the conscious mind says, yes, I want to change, I must. The unconscious has already run the numbers. Change means becoming a stranger to myself. It doesn't matter if it's for good or bad. It doesn't have this filter. We do. Better to keep, or in other words, fail in a way that's familiar, than to change, or perhaps succeed in a way that's unrecognizable. The way out, which isn't what you think. So, the religions weren't entirely wrong, and the myths weren't lies either. Suffering does forge us after all. The easy path rarely leads anywhere meaningful, which is why the hero's descent is real. It just wasn't supposed to be a permanent address. However, the error wasn't in saying that suffering has value. Rather, the error was turning a passage into a room, something you furnish and live in, instead of a door you pass through. Because here's the thing: suffering that goes somewhere becomes transformation. On the other hand, suffering that circles back on itself is just suffering. So then how do you actually move through it? The answer: that feels right. Become aware of it. Catch yourself. We've already seen why that's not enough. After all, the ego absorbs awareness and makes it part of the same story. So you need something different. You don't destroy the old identity, because that feels like death, and the psyche fights it. Instead, you build a second story alongside it. Not with affirmations or positive thinking, but with evidence. Small moments when you acted against the old script. Maybe you finished something when you could have quit, or you didn't collapse even when collapsing was an option. Sometimes you simply chose the harder thing for no other reason than because you chose it. Each moment is a brick, but, and here's the crucial part most people miss, you have to narrate these moments to yourself. The failure story is powerful, simply because you've told it 1,000 times. You've given it language, structure, texture. Meanwhile, the success moments pass in silence, evaporating before they can harden into identity. So the practice is this: one moment a day. Not just I worked out, but rather I didn't want to, I almost didn't, and yet I went anyway. Give it an arc, give it weight, and most importantly, make it a story your unconscious can hold on to. Then over time, slowly, not dramatically, a second self begins to form, not replacing the old one, but running alongside it. And now you have something you didn't have before: choice. The hero's journey was always about descent and return. The point was never to stay in the underworld. The point was to come back. changed, but back. Thank you for watching.